Christian media is surging. Is that due to fake news? In part. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. There is this new survey that just came out from Barna and the National Religious Broadcasters, NRB, that found more and more Americans are turning to Christian media as their trusted source of news. So what's going on there? Is it due to the rise of fake news? Is it due to the cultural rock star presence of President Donald Trump and his use of the phrase fake news that has sort of drummed its way into the national unconsciousness? And now we're all conditioned to look at the news in a new way and, as such, look for alternative sources of news, that is, Christian news? Or is it that the news itself is failing the American people? Well, I've been in the news business for 30 years or so, and I'm going to go with door number 3 on that one. But before we get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, where I would point you to the newsletter section at washingtontimes.com and ask you, please sign up for Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's my newsletter. You will get the commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts delivered right to your door. I would also ask that if you go to Real Life Network to look for Bold and Blunt, check out some of the other faith-based podcasts and video blogs that they have there. They have a lot of news that puts in perspective these chaotic times from a faith-based perspective, from a faith-based viewpoint, which really makes sense of things. Instead of just looking at everything that takes place in politics and culture as sort of its own problem, as sort of springing up from nowhere, and then playing this sort of whack-a-mole type game where you try and put out the newest challenge, the newest problem, the latest fire that is sprung, and constantly fighting. If you look at what's going on from a biblical perspective, you see it's all rooted in the same issue. It's all rooted in the idea of a fallen, sin-filled humanity turning collectively away from God. All roads lead back to God, whether good or bad. So the good things that happen in life, God gets the credit for it. The bad things that happen in life, God doesn't get the blame for that. We get the blame for that because we've turned from God. So if you look at what takes place in politics and culture and society from a Bible-based viewpoint, it makes things a lot clearer, and it shows that the entire war is one of spirituality. The entire war is the battle of principalities. It's not fighting A politician or B politician or C politician so much as it is fighting against the satanic forces that have rebelled against God. So it makes it clearer, and it makes the battle much more easier to wage, far less fatiguing. But you can also get Bold and Blunt, to get back on track here, anywhere podcasts are available. I wrote about this new survey from Barna and Religious Broadcasters in the Washington Times as one of my commentaries, and I'm just going to read a little bit from it because, hey, I wrote it, so I know it's the truth. A new survey from Barna and National Religious Broadcasters finds more and more Americans are turning to Christian media as a source of news, and moreover, it's mostly younger consumers, the Gen Z types, who are leading the charge. Fake news has met its match. Let me skip down a bit. By the numbers, the pollsters found this: more than 60% of American adults tune in to Christian media. 2/3 of Americans regard Christian media as valuable and trustworthy, and 64% of those who engage with Christian media on social platforms are Gen Zers. The very youthful Americans' previous polling have shown to be the generation that is turning from the church and faith. Don't you find that inspirational and motivational and optimistic? I mean, look at the disaster called corporate news, called mainstream news, which we might as well just say Marxist news. Look at what's gone forth at MSNBC, at CNN, at the old staunch, CBS, ABC, NBC, right? The big three that Americans used to turn to nightly to get their trusted news of the day. Well, that was so I don't know, put a decade on it, right? Because it's so far back that we can't even refer to it now with half listeners remembering that time, right? That's how far back it was. So we have this new age of media where it's opened up, and some people have criticized that. Some people have said, oh, there's too much out there, how do you get to the truth? There's so much, and there's too much, it's too confusing. Well, that's the same line of logic that criticizes store shelves in America offering way too many products. There are too many types of aspirin, there are too many types of beef jerky, there are too many types of tissue paper. I can't pick, I can't choose, I don't know what to do. Well, ask a socialist from a socialist country if having too many choices is bothersome. And the ones who have fled their socialist country to come to America will say, what are you, crazy? More is better. Choice is good. And guess what? That goes for news as well. The more news out there, the more sources that the average individual has to turn to fact check, right? And it's really not that burdensome. It's not like you get, on your doorstep each morning, 86 different newspapers, and you have to comb through them all with font so small nowadays, by the way, that I don't know who can read those newspapers anymore. I think they need to come with their own handy dandy magnifying glass for the over 20 crowd, because anyone over the age of 20, I don't even know how you can read the font nowadays. Okay, that's my rant. But the fact is, it doesn't come on your doorstep, right? 86 papers, 84 newspapers that you have to diligently comb through each day. You have to get up at 3 a.m. and spend the next 84 hours reading 84 newspapers. It's easy. It's easy now because everybody has a smartphone. Everybody's plugged in all the time. Everybody has a computer. Everybody has something that they can turn to where you can access the internet. And say Trump gives a speech. Say Trump signs executive orders. Say Trump signs an executive order condemning the burning of the American flag and saying we're going to jail anyone who burns the American flag nowadays. Well, that sounds racy. That sounds radical. That sounds very un-American, right? So you, as an American, what do? Do you stick with that, or do you start researching? Well, it's very easy to click on that topic or type in that topic online on a Google search, on any search, on a Bing search, on a DuckDuck, whatever that goose search is, and suddenly you will get 84 different stories, So instead of 84 fully packed newspapers, you get 84 stories online, and you can click through them all very quickly, and you can get the specifics, A, B, C, D, and if there is an E for your bullet points, and you can find out that MSNBC says this, and CNN says that, and Christian Today says this, and Washington Times, bing, 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 Washington Times says that, and Breitbart says this, The Hill says that. And if you're smart, you'll just go right to the website, and the White House website, that is, and read the executive order yourself, and you'll find out that, hey, maybe that headline was a little bit racy, a little bit hysterical, a little bit not so truthful, and you can form your own opinion as an American citizen. That is easy, and you can do it in 15 minutes. I know you can because I did it with Trump's executive order on the flag burning issue, and it only takes a few minutes. So more is better, and actually the more news from the far left that is falling by the wayside because people are disgusted with their deceptions, the better. And into that void, apparently, is creeping Christian media. And those who aren't even Christian, this is the cool thing about this poll. Those who aren't even Christian are turning to Christian media. The poll found a good majority of Americans in general, not Christian Americans, not church-going Americans, not evangelical Americans, but just average American citizens of all beliefs, of maybe not even any beliefs, are turning to Christian media. And that's a good thing, because it not only makes Christian media more mainstream, which is where it belongs, by the way, in a nation that was founded on a quest for religious freedom, right? That was the biggest reason America was founded, the quest for religious freedom. And in a country that recognized the idea that individual rights and liberties come from God and government is only in place to preserve and protect those God-given rights and liberties. In a nation like that, you want to have media that has some sort of faith-based element to it, that recognizes at least the existence of a higher power, of a higher authority, of God. And so whether you're Christian or not, whether you believe in God or not, the fact that Christian media is exploding in America, that more and more Americans are turning to Christian media as a trusted source of news, well, that speaks well for the future of America. That speaks well of Christian media, which I'm going to go ahead and consider Bold and Blunt part of that label, under that umbrella. What do I start Bold and Blunt with? Every episode, Christian conservative, right? Christian conservative. Christian first, conservative second. Christian media. But it also bodes well for the state of media in general. It's saying that Americans are sick and tired of being lied to by the mainstream media, by the MSNBCs and CNNs, by the Washington Post and New York Times. Please give back your Pulitzer Prizes for your god-awful Russia collusion coverage. And it says that Americans are sick and tired of a media that does not recognize that the American public is not stupid, right? Because that's what the media has been selling us for far too long. They think that you and I are too stupid to realize that the media is lying to us. And what's more, they're very arrogant, right? When they are outed, when they are caught red-handed in a lie, do they apologize? Do they say, I was wrong, I am sorry? Or do they issue through their publisher or their spokesperson or their editorial board or their unsigned so-and-so unnamed at the paper or corporation some sort of quasi-apology that's wedged in between explanations and clarifications and self-defenses and things like that, right? I mean, they don't ever just come out and say, I'm sorry. And they don't definitely ever come out and say, I'm so sorry that we're going to change the way we're doing business. I know the Washington Post had Jeff Bezos announcing some months ago that he's on the search, on the hunt, on the quest for a conservative opinion page editor. But who is the person and how conservative are they? And what is really the chance of a lone conservative surviving in the wild, wild Marxist West called the Washington Post without having some sort of support? I hope that one conservative has an ironclad contract, right, that guarantees employment for X period and guarantees a forced retirement package of X amount, because you know that day's coming quicker than you can say you're fired, right? So the mainstream media getting a quick wake-up call to all their horrible, deceptive ways. And now Christian media is filling the void. And now today, to talk more about it, I have the CEO of National Religious Broadcasters, NRB, Troy Miller. Troy, so great to have you back on Bold and Blonde. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's always great to be with you. Thank you.
So I'm looking at this Barna report conducted with NRB. You are CEO of National Religious Broadcasters, and you're finding that there is a sort of explosion in growth of Christian media. Detail some of the findings.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we did this report with Barna. We started to look at, we wanted to understand, what effect Christian media is having in the culture today and amongst the general population. So when we did this report, Cheryl, one of the things we asked was, tell us your usage of Christian media outside of your local church. Don't include your local church, your local pastor. So this is a broad look at Christian media. And right out of the bat, the number that just jumped to us, that 60% of Americans use Christian media in some form. And that's Americans in general. That's not just Christians or those who call themselves Christians or evangelicals. That's the general U.S. population. 60% of them use Christian media in some form.
That's a good number. And I suppose we ought to start with a definition of Christian media.
Yeah, and so we did. We really defined that as where do you go to tune in and find more information out about Christianity, or to learn more about Christianity, or to get a worldview, a perspective from a Christian worldview. So that was kind of the definer for us as we went into this, of what Christian media meant to them. And again, outside of their own local church.
Well, that's good news for Bold and Blonde, right? News from a Christian conservative perspective. So I'm liking that. So the 60%, what is that telling you if you step back and you look at sort of the commentary on the culture in America?
Well, I think that, along with some of the other numbers that we'll probably get into here, but two numbers that I want to hit really maybe a little early, is that the leading demographics, the leading age groups that were tuning into Christian media, we would have thought would have been, most people I think stereotype would have said that would have been older Christians, baby boomers, X-Geners, but Gen Z led the way with 64% engagement with Christian media, primarily social media, followed by millennials with 58% engagement. And I think, Cheryl, that tells us that there's a big shift going on in the culture right now, and the culture is moving away from liberal, progressive, secular messaging.
Is it because of the sort of fake news brand that has been affixed by President Donald Trump, particularly in the last few years? But it's been caught. It's sort of become a cultural norm to call out fake news whenever they do something that is found to be untruthful. Is it that, or is it that actually people are looking for something deeper, more meaning in their lives?
I'm going to say it's both of those things. I think what Trump has done and what the MAGA movement has done is it made it not afraid to speak out against these cultural messages. I think that for so long there was an elitism kind of, if you spoke out against the cultural messages, you were vilified. And so I think that's given people a more curiosity, maybe even a more boldness on their part to speak out. But really the second side, I think, is the rejection of that mainstream message. And this is why, because one of the answers that we asked for was why were you searching out? Why do you use Christian media? What are you looking for? And the top motivator by users was encouragement. They were looking for encouragement in a culture that I think just constantly tries to drag people down. And so they were looking for encouragement. And then Cheryl, it was closely followed by the desire to love God with their mind, and to learn more about the Bible. And so those two together tell you that it's not just a trendy shift. People are searching for real answers.
This is really blowing holes in the sort of model that the mainstream media uses, meaning the TV news in particular, because they sort of look for those angles and look for the wording in the headline that will drive anger among watchers, so they will feel compelled to keep watching.
Yes, exactly right. I think the idea of you said of driving this kind of always sort of rebellious spirit and movement within the culture, and trying to tear people apart or separate people, and the fact that they want to know how to love God more and more about their Bible. It says that they're looking for something more in society than what they're hearing in the mainstream media and mainstream entertainment.
So, one of the findings, and maybe you mentioned this, but whether you did or not, I wanted to drill a little deeper on this. 66% of Americans see Christian media as valuable and trustworthy. Valuable, do you know in what ways? Aside from, I guess you just detailed a little bit of that it's encouraging, but are there other ways?
Well, I think that those two go together. I think it's the trustworthy side that makes Christian media valuable. And that goes along with the next statistic down the line that 60% of Christians, media users, say that they use Christian media as an alternative to mainstream media. And we know that mainstream media, their approval ratings are in the low teens. And mainstream media has really lost all of its credibility. And so that credibility comes with a value to it, because if you can trust what you're being told, then that's valuable to you. And the second thing I think is we drilled down to that for looking what people were trying to get. They were looking at something that was going to change their life in the positive. Like, how is this going to improve my life? How is this going to make my life better? How is this going to make my relationships better? And so when we looked at some of the other data, some among the top top reasons, people said what the benefits were. They said a stronger sense of God's purpose, a deeper love for Jesus, an improvement of mental and emotional well-being, and then more meaningful relationships. And those things, Cheryl, that makes our lives valuable. That makes us better people, and we all feel better about that.
That's really interesting. So, NRB is sort of the leading organization for Christians in media. Your organization has been experiencing some huge growth in recent years as well. You just opened a full-time DC office now, right? Your headquarters?
That's correct. We have a full-time permanent office in D.C. for our work that we do on Capitol Hill within public policy area, and we're very excited about that. And our annual conference, NRB conference, has grown almost 20% a year over the last 4 years. We had nearly 6,000 in attendance this last year, and we're expecting over 7,500 next year. Again, I think because there's a hunger for Christian media, there's also at the same time, God's calling more and more people to get into Christian media, especially young people, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, as a member of NRB and an attendee of the conferences for the last few years, I've personally, I've seen the explosion in growth, and I think it has become really more meaningful to many in America than even such annual events as CPAC.
Oh, I think so. We're a little different focus, but again, I think that goes back to that there's a deeper feeling and a deeper understanding in Christian conservatism than there just is in conservatism itself. I mean, conservatism itself gives us, some sense of security in the economics and maybe in social life and thing. but Christianity gives us that inner peace, and it gives us that ability to how we relate to one another. And Cheryl, in today's culture, also how we can work together and not always have to be at odds with one another.
You know, the political world bleeding into the culture over the last few years, honestly, I'm going to pinpoint it since Barack Obama days, has really just been so divided. It's almost like America is at war with herself, and it's so needless.
Oh, it is pointless and needless. And look, I'm going to agree with you. It really kind of started during that administration. And then it just seems like the left and the world, that's their only message is divide, 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 divide. When you get down to it, and I think we're seeing this, we have so much more in common than we have that brings us together than separates us. And we're starting to see the same thing. I think one of the outcomes out of this, Cheryl, is we're starting to see people again have meaningful dialogue on the issues. And start to say, hey, we can work together to solve this problem. I mean, whether it's the crime problem or poverty problem or education problem, I think if we work together on it and not divided, then we can solve the problems. And again, that goes back to people finding meaning in the relationships in their lives. And those meanings are what drive us together, not apart.
Yeah, that sort of gives an optimistic outlook because there have to be, I'm conservative and I've struggled to find somebody in the Democrat Party with whom I can engage in a rational manner because it just seems like there's too much division. And now, as you say, it's sort of coming round full circle and people are starting to wake up to the fact that we need to disagree without being disagreeable. And I guess, Christian media helps that. Do you think it's just a blip, the growth in Christian media, or do you think it's here to stay?
I think it's here to stay. And again, because I think it really affects people's lives in a meaningful way. And when your life starts to have meaning to it and purpose to it, and your relationships are better and you're happier and you find that joy, that's hard to walk away from. That's hard to back away from, and especially if you've experienced the other side that is mainly, this despair and constant conflict. So I think the left progressive secular message has a real problem here in the fact that they're just losing in their ability to make people sort of angry. I think they're losing out, and that the Democrats, as you said, that they lead this. You just see that's why their numbers are shrinking.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll learn lessons and come around to sanity once again. And last question, Troy, because I know our time is just about at end. What's next for NRB? What do you see on the horizon?
Well, we still have a lot of work to do. I tell people we live in such a great time of communications now where practically everybody is a communicator and has a large sphere of influence. So we're going to continue to help people build on those tools today. We have a lot coming on. We have AI coming on. And we still have a big fight, Cheryl, with corporate America today. I think another group that hasn't gotten this message is corporate America. And so that's one of the areas that we're going to be concentrating on is how to educate corporate America, who this large audience is out here and what the American population really thinks about Christianity, because they vilify us a lot.
Good point. And I'm glad you mentioned AI. That's going to be huge. Troy Miller, CEO of NRB, I want to thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Same here, Cheryl. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.